Hi class, this is Dr. Kaufman and this is the lecture video for Chapter 13 of Theories in Counseling at Grand Canyon University. What I'm going to accomplish with this video is the first half of the theories covered in Chapter 13 on family system theory. On the slide here we have our four founding individuals for family systems approach as it pertains to psychology and counseling services. We have Salvador Minuchin, Virginia Satir. We also have Jay Haley on the right and Murray Bowen in the middle. So those are our four founding individuals, and those are the people I'm going to talk about with this lecture video and the next one. So let's go ahead and get started. So family systems is an approach that is incorporated either into individual therapy or it's used with a family in your counseling room. And so when you're dealing with a problem and you're thinking about it systemically, we might be pushed to think of it like our individual has a problem and counseling needs to see a solution, and the solution is something that they need to be able to do themselves. But in family systems approach, the problem is this person exists inside a system, their family, and that family operates in their community, and that community is in a certain place in society. And so all of these things are compounding the situation, and sometimes the actions that would result in positive change are not just decisions or behaviors that our individual client can manifest on their own. And sometimes we need to look at the problem of a systemic shift would lead to the positive change. So the major approaches that our textbook talks about related to how family systems theory works are structural family therapy, strategic family therapy, and sometimes in publications you'll see structural and strategic, like they go together. In fact, that's how I learned about them in my master's program, is that they were collective and they had individual elements that could be parsed out, but that they do combine into one family systems approach. Then there's Bowenian family systems therapy, and then there's the existential or humanistic approach. And so what we want to do is work in this video on thinking about the person as a part of a system that is functioning functionally or dysfunctionally, healthy or with difficulty in their system. And what we want to do is help the person have balance in that system so that they can operate in a way that they identify as successful, and that will lead to the system functioning in a way that it can identify as successful. So we're looking at the client like they are a part of a team in some respects. And so as part of a team, every person in the family has a role that they're going to play out. So this is a graphic that's used often in the treatment of addictions. So what you'll see is this family has a lot of dysfunction, but certain people in the family don't look like they're doing all that bad. However, by them not doing all that bad, they are presenting the environment to the people who are struggling to continue to struggle. And so as a family, we should look at this and say, don't we want everyone in this family to be valued and feel successful? And so if I can sacrifice a little bit of my role so that I can open up the opportunity for people like the scapegoat to not get into as much trouble, or the lost child to feel found, or the victims to realize that they aren't victims, they're actually the key figures in the system that send the rules and the mandates to all the people, and it trickles down from their decisions into the other family members. And so you look at the family hero, like this girl is focusing on college and she's the overachiever and there's never anything wrong with her. Everyone should be like her. Well, actually, the family hero is allowing her to escape all the dysfunction in the family. And so she uses her success as a way to be above it all. And then you see the victims like, oh my gosh, these parents, the scapegoat is making life so hard for them. Imagine what they could do if they could focus on the whole family instead of just the scapegoat. When really the scapegoat is just saying, hey, what about me? And so they get into trouble because negative attention is better than no attention. I promise you that. This is something I've learned as a counselor over the years doing family therapy, that the scapegoat will continue to draw attention to themselves by whatever means possible because the victims are not going to pay attention to them if they do something positive, because it's not quite as positive as what the family hero would do. And then, by the way, there's the enabler, who often sort of keeps the secrets of the scapegoat and the lost child and makes it so they can continue doing their thing. And then the mascot is just there trying to keep everything balanced by making jokes and trying to keep people from realizing how terrible everything is. And so all these people combine into what we call a family, and that family has a status quo, or they have a average level of anxiety that they're okay with, and this is their homeostasis. Homeostasis is the balance level of the family. And so homeostasis does not always mean healthy balance. It just means balance, whether healthy or unhealthy. So family systems approaches can be used to help the family move to where homeostasis and the status quo are in those more healthy ranges of understanding each other and working together to create the family that we're trying to pretend that we have. Right, so I'm going to share a couple slides about Virginia Satir because her approach does make its way into the textbook, and although we don't have any discussion questions or assignments that are about her, I think it's important to understand what she brings to the family systems approach. And I want you to pay attention to that quote up in the top left. Life is not what it's supposed to be. It's what it is. The way you cope with it is what makes the difference. That's a very cognitive behavioral kind of concept if you remember what we were talking about last week. But I think it also helps to understand what family systems approaches can be, that we're trying to help the family to identify their status quo and to be able to experience a change process. And so you look on the right, the change process, we have the old status quo that's very chaotic, and it doesn't help everyone to experience the positivity of life that they would want to. And so when we create a change through therapy, there's going to be some resistance because we're making the deal more fair for people that it felt uncomfortable for, but we're also taking away some of the freedoms that the people who were benefiting under the old system were really enjoying. That resistance is going to lead to chaos. Now everyone's role is different and they don't know how to live their day. But then there will be for each member of the family an aha moment where it transforms the way they see what the therapy is trying to do. And now they're going to buy in, and they're going to be able to live their life in a way that hopefully moves them closer to that ideal. As they integrate these new insights into the family dynamic, over time, eventually a new status quo will be found. And the balance that's struck by that new status quo should feel a lot more fair to everyone in the family. And we'll notice that people who used to be unsuccessful are now viewed as a little bit more capable, dependable, reliable, and successful. And meanwhile, the people who were successful under the old system, maybe their day-to-day is a little different for them, but they're still unharmed by this therapeutic change. And that's what Satir was trying to talk about in her approach. So Satir brought to us a series of concepts, 7 of them, in fact, that we need to understand in order to use family systems approaches in a better, more effective way. First is differentiation. This is how different can a person be but still fall in line within the structure of the family. How nurturing and supportive are our relationships? Is each member of the family allowed to have autonomy to make their own decisions without everyone, losing their cool and then going after the person to lock them back down by the rules of the family? Is everyone allowed to have self-esteem, or do we belittle certain people so that we build ourselves up, but as a result, the family system is never fairly balanced? Is the power shared or understood and accepted by every member in the family? Do people have the power to make their own decisions, or does everyone have to fall in line and make a request to the person who's the head of the household? Are we productive under the current strategy of the family, and do we feel loved? If we have yeses or comfortable acceptance for all 7 of these, then the family system is functioning rather well, according to Satir's approach. Now, a healthy person is going to be able to be playful, feel loved, and be authentic to themselves. A dysfunctional person is going to have symptoms that are a sign that communication is faulty, that maybe it's incompatible with their current life goals, or maybe it's confusing or inconsistent. The boundaries are going to be rigid, so once people start doing things for their own self-interest, that's viewed as conflicting with the overall family value system, which is really unfair. The family should seek to construct a system that allows each person to have some flexibility and freedom. And the rules of the family could also be constructed so that people have to be incongruent with themselves. So going back to some of those existential and humanistic concepts, we want to use therapy to allow people to accomplish an honest view of themselves and have congruence with high self-esteem. And that would lead to the individuals being healthy in the family, and that would lead to the family system itself being overall more healthy. And that's one of the differences in this approach, is we think about the family like it is made up of all these different individuals, but it has its own overall level of health, sort of like the family is its own client. So if we can provide a sense of warmth and acceptance and a focus on the here and now, figure out the things we need to figure out, and help each member of the family to have a comfortable level of humanistic support and acceptance of themselves, then that is going to lead to a positive experience of therapy. So in order to do that, we're going to take a family, we're going to identify who is blocked from reaching their potential the way the family is currently constructing itself and its rules. How do we engage in each client feeling healed by the process of therapy so that they can release from this blocked potential feeling and start moving towards their goals? And how can we get other members of the family to support them and want to see them succeed in doing so? And if they do succeed in doing so, they'll have an increased level of self-esteem, and then that helps them over time to feel congruent and authentic within themselves. And so those are the goals of therapy, and then the elements of therapy combine together and we coalesce into a positive systemic approach in therapy. Now here's another example of the status quo cycle in the form of a line chart. So we look at the bad status quo like it's the one that infringes on people's freedoms and fulfillment of potential. The foreign element is therapy. We add in the therapy objectives. It creates chaos because change is uncomfortable. And that's something I hope you're picking up on as we do video after video in this class, is change is uncomfortable, but the goal is to come out of it on the other side with a higher level of comfort, insight, and understanding for yourself. So then you will hopefully receive the transforming ideas sometimes during therapy, either during session or outside of session. Things will click together. And then the strategy is going to start working for you. It's going to start working for the family. And then a new status quo is established. And so that is the flow of events from contact and therapy to chaos and through to integration of the new status quo concept. Now, as far as techniques in this approach, you want to be authentic and spontaneous. You want to be able to provide a sense of warmth, and some other ideas from the textbook are on this slide, and I really do recommend that you read the interventions and techniques from the textbook so you understand them. In fact, one thing I do every time I teach this class is I have the classroom do a family sculpting activity to create a snapshot of what the classroom feels like if it is a family system. So maybe I allow myself to become part of that sculpt as well. So one member of the class will instruct me on where to stand and what pose to be doing. Other members of the classroom, maybe the loud ones, are more talking directly at me, and then maybe the more passive, sitting in the back of the room, not saying much during the lecture, are the ones off to the side kind of looking or holding a notebook or holding their device, their iPad or whatever that they take notes on. And then we snap the picture and we talk about it as a class about how, as a family system, we are illustrating the experience of classroom learning with our family sculpt. And that's a good activity because it allows you to see what kind of creative approach you can use in a systemic situation when all these people are in your therapy office. And that brings us to structural family therapy. This is going to be the last approach that I cover in this video. And we're talking about Salvador Minuchin's work here, where we talk about boundaries and how people can connect to each other. And so I want you to look at the graphic on the right of this slide. These are the different boundaries. So as you can see, sometimes we need to be more farther apart from strangers. Sometimes it's okay to let people who are close friends and family in closer to know more about us. And sometimes when there is a lack of trust in the family or there's chaotic rules impacting the system, sometimes those boundaries become enmeshed, like people are too intimately detailed with each other. So think about the door to your bedroom. Like put yourself back in the mindset of a teenager living with your parents. The door is a really good expression of what boundaries are healthy for a family and which ones are not. And every family handles the door of their teenager differently. But if you are a family where the door is always open, then that says one thing about your boundaries. If you're a family where the door is closed, but there's trust and there's reasonable expectations about why that door would be closed, so people are not expected to be doing dysfunctional things in their room, so there's not this doubt and mistrust when you see the door closed, then that's the healthy boundary. And some people, they close their door because maybe the family part of the parental subsystem is always arguing, or maybe the chaos throughout the house is causing the adolescent from not being able to study. And so that's a situation where the door would be closed and form a healthy boundary for that individual. But then if the family says, your door can't be closed, you need to deal with our chaos, right? That could be seen as an enmeshed, unhealthy boundary. So that door for that teenager is a metaphor for the boundaries that are existing within the family circle. So just think about that as we see these circles on the screen and how that plays out with different levels of psychological function and dysfunction that we're going to see in our office in our future career as a counselor. Now, the subsystems within a family are really important to understand in terms of structural therapy. So on the right, you see the parent-child subsystem. And so that's how the parents deliver rules and demands to children and how children send back those communications to the parents in the system. There's the marital subsystem. And that's sort of the intimacy between husband and wife, or the two parents who are in charge of fulfilling that role for the family. There's the co-parenting subsystem. So that's the part of the marital subsystem, but it's where the identities for the parents in communicating with their kids functions. And then there's the sibling subsystem. So this is where brothers and sisters interact and what rules of engagement exist for them. And so these are all the things in terms of how do the pieces of this family fit together. Does it fit nicely, or is it kind of confusing to see? And are the rules always fluctuating so nobody knows what to expect from moment to moment? These are all the questions the structural family therapist would have when going into a new family situation. So we need to understand the boundaries. How freely do people in this system communicate? And what do communications look like between members of the same subsystem and communications between members of different subsystems? Now I have here an explanation of how boundaries are somewhat fluid from situation to situation. We have on the right here an example of the circumplex model, which this is something that I researched years ago in actually a project that I did when I was a graduate student, and I've integrated it into the way I describe structural family therapy because I think it's really neat to see how the boundaries and the rules of engagement alter themselves from moment to moment. So we have two continuums here, flexibility and cohesion. And so you can have high or low flexibility, high or low cohesion. And for a typical functional system to work, you want to have things that are in the middle, but have the opportunity to switch to be healthy from situation to situation. So this family, for example, starts out with a separated level of cohesion and a flexible approach to rules. And that is before the family crisis. Now, the family crisis exhibited in this table is a heart attack to the husband. So the husband, once seen as unfailing and cannot be harmed, now they're in the hospital on the verge of death, but they come out of it. So the family idea of who this father and husband is shaken. So now we need a high level of cohesion. We need to worry about how the husband-father is doing at all times, and we need to have no flexibility, right? Or so much flexibility either way. Like we're going to bounce between those two. That we're just going to be overboard with rules like heart attack. You have to watch your diet. We have to restrict your exercise. You have to be limited physical activity. And then going to other members of the family, like, we don't know where they are. We know where they would be, but then the heart attack happened. So everyone's schedule is different. So different people carpool to different events now. And so we have B and C, which are chaotically enmeshed and then rigidly enmeshed, depending on who you're looking at within the system and depending on how long it's been since the heart attack. And then we move back to letter D, where we have more structured rules, like the diet things and the exercise things happen, but people more or less know where everyone's at, and we stay in contact. We send more check-in text messages than we did during letter A. And now we're in that purple zone again. Although it's a little different, the purple zone is a little bit more freedom for everyone involved. So that is one example of how boundaries can change as the situation changes. And as a family therapist, we're going to be changing that situation quite frequently, so we need to know what our family is in for. We need to be able to explain to them before it happens that changes are uncomfortable. You just have to hang in there and stick with it, have some perseverance to see what is actually happening and to tough it out, so that once we understand this change has taken place and it's been 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 9 weeks, 12 weeks, then there should be a new status quo because we have altered the structure of what everyone is expecting. And that's what Minuchin is talking about in structural family therapy. Now, another thing to worry about is that it's important for everyone to develop healthy in terms of the expectations for them. So remember that rules should match the situation. So some parents are very rigid with their approach to rules and boundaries, and that works very well with children who are thinking more in terms of meeting the expectations of authority figures and thinking in a concrete kind of way. They learn a rule, they follow the rule. But then as we develop as people, we start to engage that abstract thought process and understand morality a little better, and we start to form our own decisions. And so parents who feel very successful in their parenting role when their child is below 10 years old or below 15 years old or below 20 years old may start to struggle when their child reaches those young adult to adult age years where they have to make their own decisions. And the reason for that is if you expect to always have these rigid rules that you send forth onto the child subsystem, at some point that child is going to become an adolescent, young adult, and then an adult. And so the expectation of how those boundaries impact them should also fluctuate with the developmental stage. And so you want the child to be able to be seen as having self-esteem and being effective in their environment. You want to support them in doing so. And you want to have a structure of your family that allows them to accomplish that. Another thing to worry about is boundaries and how they cut off individuals. So sometimes we hurt each other in a family. We do something that's highly emotional and it impacts the trust, such as with addictions, which I still treat every week with people doing counseling sessions of different kinds, family, individual, in person, and webcam or telephone. And you see these cut-off boundaries all the time where there's just a wall and there is no communication now pushing through that wall. And what that does is it creates a dysfunctional scenario for the family system. Is the system does rely on communication, meeting expectations, and having mutual trust. And so when you have these different boundaries that impact that and you also cut down communications deliberately, then that creates all kinds of problems. From a structural perspective, it could result in a triangle being formed, which we'll talk about that more when we're covering the Bohemian family system approach. But it also just shuts down the ability of different values and concepts passing from person A to person B. And over time, that is difficult for the family to overcome and leads to dysfunction. Another thing to understand within family systems approaches is the use of the genogram. The genogram is like a family tree, but with psychology added to it. So with the genogram, we're able to see what relationships are healthy and positive, what beliefs from person to person are effective, and who's on my team, where are the alliances, where are the cutoff boundaries, and who is in conflict with each other. So you see here a sample genogram that I got from the computer program GenoPro, and it gives you a couple samples to start you out to see how this would work. And this is an example from the Harry Potter books and movies. So you see Harry Potter is the identified patient, and that's the person that we're treating directly. And we see all the different characters from Harry Potter's world. So, of course, you don't see just family members with this. You can also put on the genogram important individuals to understand in the person's life. So, you see his parents, James and Lily Potter, were killed by Lord Voldemort, who's off on the right, sending red lines everywhere, except to his snake, Nagini. So even Lord Voldemort, the Dark Lord and leader of the Death Eaters, has a positive relationship with his evil pet snake. And then you also see other adult members from Harry Potter's life in the upper part, and you see other fellow students and Gryffindors that Harry interacts with in the bottom half. And so you see this family tree. Older individuals have connective lines leading to the birth and development of younger individuals, and then it perpetuates itself over time. And that's how a genogram would work. So I actually know about 100 things about Harry Potter's life just by looking at this genogram. And that's a great thing to construct with your client. It helps them to see how their problems came to be in a historical context and how to shut down problems that have perpetuated themselves over time amongst people that really do impact their life. And that's why we do genograms. So maybe you'll take some time to integrate this if you become a family therapist into your assessment approach. That would be a really good way to be truly a family therapist, the way that you conduct yourself in therapy with individuals who are affected by a system. And so what we're going to do is we're going to join with them in their process. So we are the leader of the system approach, but the client is the leader about their own family. So we want to open up and explore the present complaint. And then as the clinician, we're going to have the client highlight the problem and how the interactions have been maintained in that problem over time. Then we're going to start altering the structure, the way people engage each other, the way boundaries are formed, the way alliances are setting up, the way people are interacting. And then we're going to start talking with them about different ways to relate with each other. And that is how therapy will conduct itself over time. This doesn't happen all in one session, but these are the little goals that we're aiming for as we meet with the family week by week, month by month. Now, if you want to see Minuchin in action, I highly recommend that you pause this lecture and take some time to watch the YouTube video titled Unfolding the Laundry Session 2. In this way, you can see how Minuchin joins with the family and starts to engage with them from a structural way. So he is sitting in the system as part of the family structure during the session. He's the individual all the way on the left of this image. And I think it would be a really good academic activity for you in order to bring to life this theory and how the man who created a lot of these principles was using his work with real families in real therapy rooms to figure out some of these concepts and publish them and get them into the hands of other people in the field so that his ideas can benefit more and more people. And here's a list of techniques that you might see if you do take the time to watch that video. Things like boundary making, unbalancing. Unbalancing is where you see where the power vacuum is in the family and you take that power away and shift it somewhere else. And that can be really uncomfortable for the family system to experience. But it's ultimately important because that power structure is creating some of the dynamics that lead to other people having roles and tasks that do not lead to their own fulfillment. And the goal is to spread that success around the family and allow everyone to structurally experience the best version of their contribution to the family. Looking at the family more like a team than looking at, well, we all have to move out of the way so that so-and-so achieves success in the system. Everyone should achieve some level of acceptable success in the family. And as a clinician, you can give directives that shape the new structure and challenge the system to change in that way. So that concludes my first video for this week of lectures on family systems approach. The next video that I publish for the course will cover Jay Haley and the Palo Alto group and strategic therapy, and then wrap up chapter 13 on all the family systems approaches. Thank you for hanging in and watching this video. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you're enjoying this approach to online learning. I really do take pride in being able to pass these on to you. I think it's great for the online classroom to mimic the physical classroom as much as we possibly can. And so that's why I take the time to create these for you. I hope you all have a great rest of your day and see you during the next lecture video.